Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
You know, Tim, I got a crystal ball here in front of me. I bet I know exactly what's going to happen on the show tonight.
Oh, and what's that, Timmy?
Well, we're going to interview two great guests about psychic powers.
Well, that's right. How did you know that? Are you clairvoyant?
No, I just read the KCORradio website, so I know exactly what's going to happen. Look into my eye. Look into my eye. Well, that's what we are. Hey, Tim, how you doing out there in Jasper, Indiana tonight?
Well, I'm doing all right. I guess I'm doing a little bit better than you. Sorry that you're not feeling too good tonight.
Oh, boy, I was going to say I'm on my last of 3 legs.
Yeah.
I swear. Yeah, I guess, you know, it's that time of year. We've had 3 nor'easterlies, and now we got another storm coming in. Of course, we haven't had too much in the way of snow, but it's been cold. I mean, I can't believe that spring is right around the corner.
Well, you can always tell that it's spring around here because our neighbor was actually mowing his lawn today.
No way.
Yep, yeah. Forget about the robins and all that. When the neighbors start mowing their lawn, that's a sure sign of spring.
Well, you got to be a week or 2 ahead of us, I think. Although they predict it's going to keep still be chilly for the next couple of weeks, but I guess we'll survive, and it'll be great to see the spring, because I do live a couple of blocks from the park here, and I like to sit there and eat my lunch and watch all the people, the 9-to-5ers, go about their chosen task. Anyway, Tim, why don't you tell us who we're going to be speaking with this evening?
Well, I would be happy to, Tim, and I don't need a crystal ball or tarot cards to tell our audience who we have, because I've got it all written down right here in front of me. I make it a lot easier for myself. So with us tonight, we have just 2 fantastic guests. I'm just so happy that they agreed to be on with us. First, we have Lamont Hamilton, or Monte as his friends call him. Now, Monte is a recognized and respected intuitive spiritual counselor, writer, speaker, and educator. He is internationally known as a top clairvoyant for his predictions, which have been published and translated into multiple languages. Now, Monte is an ordained minister, a Reiki master healing practitioner, registered hypnotherapist, and has accredited qualification degrees in counseling, business, psychology, and education. Now, Monte has worked full-time in the paranormal field for over 45 years and refers to himself as a professional spiritual empath and medium working on a higher spiritual level guided by his angels and guide. He is a gifted and accomplished in several spiritual disciplines and uses his abilities to tailor his consultations to the needs of his clients. Now, his client base covers a wide range of people from all over the world and all walks of life, including educators, judges, politicians, law enforcement, business professional, Wall Street investors, CEOs and celebrities, just to name a few. Now, at present, Monte is working on a book about his own spiritual experiences and development, and I hope we can get him to talk a little bit about that book tonight. As well, we have Melissa Bryan. Now, Melissa is Little Feather, 16th generation granddaughter of Elder White feather of the Iroquois people and the 14th great-grandniece of Dragon Canoe of the Western Cherokee people. Her dream in this life is to open a small store of her own. Hopefully, she'll be able to do that if she hasn't already, and to live simply. She was born in Santa Monica, California, and she says that she doesn't own anything except knowledge imparted in this life. Melissa is pedigreed to 16 generations of family lineage. And as a child, she began to have experiences that at first she didn't understand at the time. And then after a serious injury and illnesses, they became, I guess her knowledge base became even more profound. And Melissa believes something was left open and never closed back up again. And she got older, her experiences intensified. Early in life, she discovered her family's rich history of Native American heritage and links to metaphysical abilities. And the more she found, the more profound her experiences grew. So Melissa is also the owner, CEO and Melissa, you'll have to tell me how you pronounce this. Is it Umpqua Valley Psychic and Media? Umpqua. It sounds like the noise that my cat makes sometimes, which has got a hairball in her throat.
Oh, my goodness.
Melissa and Lamont, thank you very much for being with us tonight on Exploring the Bizarre.
My goodness. Hey, let's Melissa, what is the Umpqua Valley Psychic and Media?
Well, it's that I've been psychic since I was very, very young, and media means I write books, I do radio, I do videos. I am right now working on rewriting and expanding my first book that is currently out of production, but I'm also renaming it. And, I'm just working really hard on getting things back to normal. We're living in a motel at this point and trying to get permanent housing.
Where are you?
Roseburg, Oregon.
Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had a rough winter up there?
No, actually, it's been really nice here.
Oh, wonderful. I had a friend was living up near Crater Lake.
Oh, yes, Crater Lake.
Yeah. And spot where a lot of people have mysteriously disappeared over the years, too. Yeah, indeed. Mm-hmm. But okay, let's go back a few years. How did what got you into? I mean, what made you think that you were different than most other people? That you were psychic?
Let's see. I've seen, I've heard, I've felt, I've sensed, I've known things that I don't think would really come to anyone else.
And in what sense? I mean, tell us about some of your experiences.
I see ghosts and spirit the same way as I see a normal individual, like a normal person. I see them solid. I mean solid. 3-dimensional solid. Okay? That's how I see them. That's how I've always seen them. And I've had my ancestors come and speak with me from spirit. I've had things follow me home. I've sent spirit back on to other side piece, whatever you want to call this. Okay. I've experienced so much. It's got to be, at last count anyway, somewhere, let's say over 300 experiences.
And what, I mean, do you have spirit guides, or do you pick this up clairvoyantly? What is your method of operation?
I really don't know how to explain it. The only way I know how to explain it is this has always been normal to me. I don't know how else to explain it. Sometimes it surprises me. Other times it's like, oh, okay, well, just another experience.
And I mean, did you live in a growing up? Did you live in a psychic environment? I mean, were your parents intuitive, or did you reside in a haunted house or have out of the body experiences?
I have had out-of-body experiences. I have had near-death experiences. I grew up in a very tightly religious household. We never spoke of these things. It was just not talked about. It was not believed in. It was not done, as it were. I grew up in this literally all alone. And I have since, in my adult life, lived in many haunted locations. One of them I just fled from in New Mexico, where I used to live. That place was bad. Bad. I mean, you want to talk anything that could happen, did happen. My cousin who lives with us was scratched and bruised. We were beaten and burned, and whatever was there was bad. And I mean bad. That thing damn near killed us.
I think it did.
It did.
You just broke up there for a minute. Well, I mean, when you say you said that your cousin was battered and bruised, was this by some like poltergeist?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. To this day, it scares me to talk about it. I am not kidding here. I can't make this stuff up. I mean, I've got photos that even I can't explain. We took pictures of this. We have pictures of where this thing scratched and burned me, scratched, burned, and bruised him. To this day, we don't have scars, but psychically, we have scars. I mean, this thing left it left an impression on us. There were bones, not only of animal, but of human. I believe this was a boneyard that we just came from. The houses were built on top of some kind of, I don't even know what you want to call this, whether it's a portal or something where spirit comes in and out. I don't even know how to explain it. We heard voices, screams, footsteps, cold breezes, disembodied conversations, just things. I'm at a loss to this date as to how to explain it.
And how old were you at the time when all this was going on?
Oh, I was about 40 years old. It was just this last year.
Ouch! Wow. And this was in Oregon?
No, this was in New Mexico. We just fled from there for our lives. Whatever this was not only drawing bad people to us, but bad energy as well. And I mean, we couldn't even get anyone to come and get rid of this stuff because anyone who did got hurt. Some were in car accidents, very serious ones. Others were just warned away from it. Others would not even show up. No one would talk about it. It was crazy. This place, whatever it was, we got out, and we got out fast.
So do you know, did people who were there before you, I mean, did they have the same experience? Or, I mean, did they come to you and say, hey, don't go there?
No one told us about it until after we bought the property.
Mm-hmm.
And we only owned this place for, I think, a couple of years, and we got rid of it. We just said, we don't want any part of this anymore. We fled for our very lives. I mean, this place was bad. It drew bad people. It drew bad energy. It was bad. I mean, this place was negative with a capital N.
Well, now, do you think the place itself was cursed, or was this some negative force that had gotten attached to you?
No, I think it was already done cursed long before we got there. It was owned by, I want to say, as many as 2 to 3 different owners prior to us. And the last one before us was the one that stayed the longest at 5 years. This thing changed hands like every 3 to 4 years.
All right, now I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here, and forgive me for asking this question, because I mean, I have been to locations like this myself, and know the type of power that these these, energetic places, the best way to describe it, can really, exude. But, okay, couldn't you, being an intuitive yourself, couldn't you tell that this was a hot spot for not good activity when you were in the process of, say, like, looking at it, going, I mean, you obviously you went to the property first before you started living there. Couldn't you tell beforehand that, hey, maybe this would not be the best place to stay?
Well, it was a matter at that point of do or die. We were being forced out of our home prior to that one. The landlord was, even though she was a nice lady, it was not an ideal situation for us. Things got tense and we were being forced out. It was do or die. I kind of in the back of my mind knew it wasn't good, but I was told I didn't have a choice. It was now or never, I tried to say no, but it was a bad situation from the go. But we got out, and I'm glad we did. We're in a good place now. We're in a good, safe place now.
I want to go back to your introduction, where it said that when you were a child, that you had experienced a serious injury and illness. This incident, do you think that this was what kind of kicked you into high gear, so to speak, for becoming an intuitive?
I think so. I have to say yes.
Can you tell us? Can you tell us about it? Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah,
I mean, how old you were when it happened?
I was about a year old. I was in Italy at the time with my parents. They'd taken me there to immerse me in my mother's culture. And I was in a building, I think it was like multi-story building, and I'd fallen, according to the story. I don't personally remember it, but according to the story I was told, I was in a walker, learning how to walk, and I was about a year old or so, somewhere in there. And I fell down a flight of marble stairs. I should have gotten very much more seriously hurt, if not killed outright. But according to what they said, all I had was a bump on my head. So did something or someone protect me? I have to honestly say yes. And the illness, from the story that I was told, if I remember right, was scarlet fever. And you know how deadly to children scarlet fever is. And I've heard stories now where it's coming back and is very, very, very deadly to children. And parents out there, please, if you can, listen to me. Get immunized. Get your children immunized. I can't stress it enough. I'm not sure if I was or not, but if I was, maybe I got it, maybe not as bad as some would have. But I urge children to please, please get immunized. Okay? I can't stress it enough. Get immunized on that. This stuff is no joke. Don't play with it. Russian roulette? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now I've heard of other people. Tim, correct me if I'm remembering this name. Peter Herkos, I think, was the gentleman's name, whom he lived basically a normal life, through adulthood. And I think, didn't he have an accident where he fell off a ladder and received a head injury?
I believe so.
Yeah, and then he became a very well-known psychic and clairvoyant.
Well, I mean, also too, didn't something similar happen to our late friend T-Lumsink Rampa?
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, I had forgotten about it. He fell out of a tree.
I think he was pruning a tree or something like that, and fell. And when he came to, after I guess being unconscious for a while, he had taken on the personality of a Tibetan Lama.
Right. So, I mean, it's not without precedent that the people have had, serious injuries and have come out of it with really, altered states of consciousness, permanent altered states of consciousness. So I find your story very interesting, Melissa, about how you were able to do that. So now you say that as far as you know, I mean, anybody else in your family? I know you said they didn't talk about it, but anybody else in your family that you know of have similar abilities, even like grandparents or great grandparents?
Well, I did some checking into my family tree, and lo and behold, yes, it actually goes back 16, maybe even 17 or more generations, all the way back even to pre-Christian times. And I found that, yes, my family is lineally psychic. Whether they want to accept it, believe it, or whatever, I don't really know. But, I mean, whether they want to believe it or not, I couldn't tell you. But yeah, we have a very, very, very long lineage of abilities.
Mm-hmm. And you say that you're descendant from what was that? Was it the Iroquois nation?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
Well, and there's a lot of history with the Native Americans, and there's especially their shamans and the abilities to use their clairvoyance to help their tribe. So so I mean, you feel that you are basically you're carrying on just a really rich tradition here.
Yes, I am. And I have actually had multiple shamans tell me, you're one of us. Wow. You're going to be. And at age 21, of course, I was very, very skeptical up until the age of 21. Mm-hmm. And my ancestors, once I hit 21, came to me from spirit and said, you're going to be a shaman. I said, I'm going to be a what? You want that ball is in y'all's court. You pull the strings. Well,
all right. Well, let's we're gonna have to pull our strings right now, Melissa, because we're coming up to our first break of the evening. So when we come back, we'll bring Lamont Hamilton into the conversation on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. The first part of the program, we had been talking to Melissa Bryan, so now we want to bring Lamont Hamilton into the show. Lamont, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine, Tim. How are you?
Oh, doing fantastic. And can we call you Monte? I know it said that your friends call you Monte, so can we?
Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Well, let's take this like we did with Melissa, Monte. Let's take it back from the very beginning. I mean, when did you first realize that that maybe you had abilities that other people didn't?
My story started when I was about 8 years old. At the time, my father had gone missing in action in Vietnam. And so when a lot of the government agents came to the house and were explaining what happened to my father, I started seeing at the time what looked like a teleprompter script at the bottom, like you would see now on most television shows and news, where you'd see the lettering or their vocals going across the bottom of the screen. And this was something that I thought was normal. I wasn't aware that I was the only one that could see it, but I also could tell when someone was speaking, if they said something that didn't match what was on the teleprompter, then I knew they were lying.
So you say that you were 8 years old when this happened. I mean, do you think that you were having these sort of experiences beforehand, but you just really weren't old enough to realize that this was anything really beyond normal? You just because when you're a kid, when these types of unusual events happen, you don't think of them as unusual. That's just, it just is. It's just part of your life.
That's correct. I believe that there were other indicators. One of them that I was very interested in electronics, starting at the age of 6. And my father was an Air Force pilot, and he was heavily into electronics and communications, but I didn't really tie that into him until after I started having the experiences with the military and people talking about my father and what happened to him. And what I think triggered it was whenever they would speak, I would get a mental image of what they were saying, and that did not coincide. If they said his plane was hit by a SAM missile, I saw his plane fly through it. And so I didn't understand that naturally for many years, but I had other experiences, I guess you could say, telepathic communications and things like that. But I wasn't aware, again, until I was much older, that, and some of it not even until I got into college, that there was something different going on. I didn't believe in psychics, by the way. Growing up, I thought that was a bunch of hooey. And it wasn't until I got in my early 20s that I took a class in the paranormal and started learning that I had a language barrier. I did not understand the language of metaphysics and the paranormal, and so I did not have an education or anyone to tell me anything. And much like Melissa, I didn't talk about it. I'm from the South, obviously, and Alabama specifically, and so you didn't talk about things like that. I often tell people I was psychic when psychic wasn't cool, because if you told anyone, they would put you in a padded room.
Which is really interesting, because I have a lot of family that came from the South, and with a very rich tradition of mediumistic abilities. I had a great grandmother who was a powwow woman, and but you're correct, though. Even though I imagine that practically every family has somebody that has these experiences, and probably, in my opinion, everybody everywhere has at least one unusual experience in their life. It's not widely talked about, and I suppose because the South, you've got the Bible Belt, and that's the kind of thing that you don't discuss because of just the idea that you could be encroaching onto the devil's territory, so to speak.
That's correct. And even when I started reaching out to ministers and other people in my teens, it didn't take long for them to shut me down and tell me that anything that I had or any abilities had to be the work of the devil, and that it was always predicated upon they did not know how to explain what happened, because I would tell them what was going on. And so it always defaulted to that it had to be something to do with the devil. I was very religious myself, even called to preach at the age of 13, was preaching at 15. And so I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that these things that I saw and was involved in had anything to do with something negative or demonic. I knew that I was missing something in my education. I just could not get it through the church at the time.
Well, now, like I asked Melissa, as far as you know, is there anybody else in your family that had similar abilities? Parents, great-grandparents, or anything like that, as far as you know?
Not that anyone has ever professed. I've naturally, through my own abilities, I can intuit and see things about family members, and I could probably say very easily that my mother is highly empathic and sensitive, and so was my father. And so they don't call it, psychic phenomena. They just say, they had a dream or they felt something, but they don't talk about it. Still, again, I could count on one hand the number of instances that or experiences that I heard from my mother. And of course, my dad went missing when I was 8, so I didn't have any interaction with him. It's only after he was killed in action in Vietnam that I was able to communicate with him and get some of that information.
All right, now I have to ask then, what kind of communications have you had with your father since he passed away? Well,
for many years I didn't have any. That was part of my spiritual path. It goes to when I was 18, I was visited by an angel, and the angel told me that I wasn't going to live to be 21. I was 18, really didn't care. I was been on my own since I was 15, had a lot of problems growing up. And I thought that I would be able to trick the angel in saying, okay, can I have a wish? Something like, rubbing the bottle with a genie.
Right.
And the angel said yes. I said, well, if I agree to what you want, and what they wanted me to do was quit drinking and smoking and doing drugs, and wanted me to use my abilities to help other people. And I said, well, if you bring my father back, you would be able to make that agreement that you bring my dad back and then I'll do what you want. In my mind, thinking it would only take 2 or 3 years to get my father back. And it ended up being 30 years later. And I'd promised not to get married or have any children. And so it wasn't until 2006 that I was able to get my father's remains and return them. But in that 30-year span, what happened was the angels taught me the gifts that I have, and they showed me how to use them. I don't read books or watch videos or anything like that. I'm very organic, and that whatever I need to know, they tell me, and they have. And that's why I have a lot of the abilities that I do. But in communicating with my father, he was telling me to keep looking for him, because that was my promise that I would bring him home, that I would use every ounce of my abilities to get him back home. And naturally I was able to do that. But there were times that he would communicate that my life was in danger, that I was treading on sacred ground, meaning that there were other people watching me that may have been aware of my abilities, and that creates a national security issue when you have those abilities. Mm-hmm. And so he was always there to protect me.
So how were your father's remains then finally located?
The government, what they did was they excavate a lot of the crash sites. And I knew in 2003 that they were close to finding his remains, and I retired in my job because of that, because I didn't want to be working, and I wanted to spend the next year or so putting all the emphasis on trying to help, our government locate his remains. Mm-hmm. And so what they did was they took a tip from some villager, and what they normally do is they go and pay a ransom, and they show them where the remains are or where a plane went down. And then it sometimes takes a year and sometimes 2 years to go in and look for the remains, and to actually validate through DNA the remains of someone.
Mm. So you talked about the angels teaching you as you were growing up. Well, actually, after you had grown up. How did they do this? I mean, I imagine it wasn't like, you'd go to sleep at night and then go to a celestial classroom someplace. So how were you taught?
Most of the time, it was, when I say organic, it meant I didn't know what I was doing. One case in point was I was working with a national dowser in Atlanta. I went to hear his seminar and to hear him talk, and he went outside and demonstrated some of the things that he did using dowsing rods. And one of the things that I just kind of heard an inner voice said, you don't need dowsing rods, you can use your hand. And so I relayed that to him and told him, and he said, why don't you show me what you're talking about? And I backed up. He told me to close my eyes, and he's told me to walk toward him, and he put a chalk line across the concrete, and he told me, let him know when my hands were across that concrete, that line that he drew. And I did it. And I opened my eyes, and he said, that's impossible. There's no way somebody can do that. He said, you cheated, and I'm going to have somebody put their hands over your face and make sure you're not looking. And I repeated it. And so most of the time, the abilities came to me spontaneously. Something would say, just do it. And I would do it. And that's how I discovered I had that ability. And oftentimes, it was a knowing, an intuitive knowing that something that someone said could not be done, I could do. Mm-hmm. And I just did it. I never had any fear, and it never failed. 100% of the time, I was able to do whatever feat that I was challenged to do.
Well, obviously that dowser, though, that made that challenge to you hadn't kept up on his homework, because, I mean, I have seen people do intuitive dowsing, just like you describe. They don't need a like a go-between, like a pendulum or the L-rod or anything like that. Now I have seen some that they'll just use their hands. They'll walk with their hands in front of them. And if their hands, say, like involuntarily jerk or move up and down or anything like that, that's how they get, the clue. But I've seen others that will just, they'll walk up and down and they'll just, point down and say, here, 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 and that's how they do it.
Yeah, that's how I do it. And mind you, this was back in the 80s. This was prior to the internet and a lot of people knowing what was going on. Later in my job, I worked at NASA. And one of the things I did was worked with a dowser there to find munitions that were buried. And I could do it with my eyes. I could just look somewhere and tell where to go. And that's exactly what he did. But I'd never had any training in doing anything like that.
Now, I find it somewhat humorous. You said that you work for NASA and did that occasionally. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but a couple of months ago, there was a big hullabaloo in England when it was revealed that a number of the water companies there still employed workers who used dowsing, L-rod specifically, to help locate pipes. But I would say that if you talk to really any kind of company that does things like that, you will find that a majority of them will use dowsers.
Oh, absolutely. Just about anybody can do it anyway. The threshold is just a sensitivity. What happened was this individual was hired by NASA to use magnetometers and specific devices to look for munitions. And what happened was he lost his dowsing rods. And I was working as an incident commander, so I was his first choice and first interface. So he came to me and he complained that he couldn't find them. And I just looked across the field and told him where to go, where to walk, and he found them. But it wasn't something that was sponsored by NASA by any means, because he was paid contractually, and he placed his life in jeopardy by doing that. And after I demonstrated what I could do, then he insisted that only I would be able to work with him, because he was in a hole, sometimes 15, 20 feet deep by 50 feet wide, and had no one else to literally watch his back. And so I would stand on the edge and tell him, go left, go right, that sort of thing, and help them. But like you said, that's commonplace now, a lot of things like that, where years ago, professional dowsers use pendulums and other devices, but I've never used any I call them props. I don't use any props to do the things that I do.
Mm-hmm. I remember seeing an old film, not that old, or at least not to me, that was taken during the Vietnam War, that showed soldiers using L-rods to locate Viet Cong tunnels. And this film, I mean, they were able to locate these tunnels practically every time, and it was just it was a fascinating film.
Yes, and they even employ psychics. The government's had, several programs that employed psychics to help them with their I guess, counterintelligence. And some of them, even like Uri Geller and others that were famous, also worked in the security and national defense industry.
Now, that's the thing. A lot of people, a lot of skeptics still love to point out how Uri Geller, was able to bend spoons and things like that using basically simple magician tricks. Yet none of them really care to admit that Uri has made a lot of money later on in life helping oil and mineral companies locate very profitable locations.
Yes, I'm familiar with the Unamazing Randy, and I've been called a moron on his website as well. But I know Uri Geller, and I've tested him, and he's the real deal. If I had to point out any one person that I would say is the best of the best, not only at heart, but in what he does, it's Uri Geller. He works for mankind. I first saw him about 1984 in New York. And that was when he made mention of a lot of people would challenge him and say, if you're so good and you can do all these things, then why aren't you rich? And so he set out to make a lot of money, and he made contracts with major oil companies. They took him in planes, and he would point out where the oil was, and became a multimillionaire doing that. So you're right.
Well, and that's one of the things that the skeptics always love to talk about is, well, if these people's abilities are real, why aren't they getting rich off of the lottery or the ponies or things like that? But I mean, I know from my own personal experiences and from experiences from other people that most of the time your abilities won't work that way. It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, for whatever reason, karma or whatever you'd want to call it. It's almost impossible to enrich yourself using your own abilities.
That's only partially true.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've asked over the years was why, they've given me lottery numbers before that was hundreds of millions of dollars, and I didn't act on it because I don't use my abilities for a financial gain windfall like that. I use my abilities to help other people. But they also pointed out, if we gave you the lottery numbers and you became rich, you would not be doing the things that you're doing, because this is how I make my living. Mm-hmm. And they said, if we gave you the money, you would probably, just like Melissa made the comment, she just wants to go off somewhere and have a store. And I even told my wife this week, I said, there'll come a day when I won't have to do this anymore, that I've satisfied my license, let's say, to the universe. But in theory, I don't really care about being rich. There are a lot of people that do. I've turned down $1 million offers to do things. I don't really care. I just like helping people. And that was my original agreement. And even though that agreement expired in 2006, I've continued to do so. But some people do well. If you look at someone like John Edwards or some of the people that are out there today, they do very well. But what happens is you start losing your edge. When you get that far up the food chain, it does something to you.
Well, it makes me wonder sometimes, some of these people that do manage to win the lottery multiple times. I mean, most people can play the numbers or whatever, for all of their lives and not do anything. But then, you'll run across these people who, they'll win $100,000 one week, and then 2 months later they win another $100,000. It just makes you wonder whether or not they didn't have the ability to tap into something that was able to pull it out, or if it was just coincidence. Of course, I don't believe in coincidence. Tim Beckley and myself, we often like to discuss synchronicity and how sure, things happen. There's a like a web throughout this universe, and sometimes, or every time, things happen for a reason.
That's true. And I'd usually call that just the law of attraction. You don't have to be psychic to be able to pick the numbers. As a person raises their vibration high enough, they attract it to them. So it's the other way around. Well,
and okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because the laws of attraction, or which, I mean, that whole idea has been around for a long time. I know there were books written about it back in the 20s. They didn't call they may have called it the laws of attraction, but the people who wrote The Secret, they made it sound like that, this was something, like brand new that was just discovered. So, what you were saying though is that everybody with the right frame of mind can use that, can bring themselves what they want out of life.
That's true. And even being psychic, it's not single dimensional. It's multidimensional, that you can have 20 or 30 different gifts and under the same umbrella. And Melissa may have, 10 different gifts, but you call her psychic. She's a medium. She's a visionary. She's intuitive. And so you use those gifts, and everyone does. Everyone has intuition, and they use it to whatever capacity they know how to use it. And when I say the law of attraction, because that's the buzzword for it, but you're
Sure.
just raising your vibration and attracting it.
Hmm. Well, I mean, and it's not just a law of attraction. I mean, from what I've read, I mean, there's a whole almost like a pantheon of various laws, which the law of attraction is just one of them.
Oh yes, you're absolutely right. It can be just somebody who was intuitively they tapped into the numbers that they use, something as simple as that.
So, I mean, does this basically mean, though, that the universe, our reality, consciousness, whatever you'd want to call it, I mean, it's made up of thoughts. It's our thoughts that is the determining factor in everything.
Somewhat. You can co-create with your thoughts and you can interfere with your thoughts, but it's imaging. Yes, we're co-creators in everything that happens in our lives, and we're influenced by the thoughts of even other people. And so it does have a common thread there, but it's not all there is.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay. All right. Well, because, I mean, you hear a lot of people, and I've read a lot of these forums that deal with people trying to, make the laws of attraction work for them. And, I mean, a lot of these people, boy, they just try so hard, and they just never seem to get it right. And they just, complain all the time about it. And I'm just like, I don't think you've got quite the right idea. But unfortunately, the laws of attraction are bringing us to our top of the hour break. So when we come back, we will continue our conversation on Exploring This Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim SWARTZ.
Such a happy camper I am tonight.
Yeah, I know. Well, Tim, listening to our guest talk tonight, I mean, now you've over the years, you've known a lot of really famous psychics and clairvoyants.
Well, I even met the great Jean Dixon. And it was almost impossible to get a meeting with her, but she had started a Jean Dixon Foundation for Children, and of course, she was friends with, I think, Nixon more than any other president. I guess one of the reasons also that she was well established because she was in the upper echelon of the real estate business in Washington, D.C. So that opened a lot of doors for her and her husband. But also, she was politically, I could never get agree with much of what she said. I don't know, she had Russian satellites for spying on us. That was the old version of the microwave.
Right.
I think, but she did have the uncanny ability to just kind of like look at you and could read you. I don't think that I could ever say that I've run into other psychics that were that, what would you call that? Well, I guess intuitive, but just by looking at an individual. Then we had a fellow now, Ed Snedeker. I think he's been he's been forgotten in time, but he used to do readings for racehorses. I guess he was able to, let's put this in quotes, speak with the racehorses, and he would apparently know which ones were going to come out, win, place, or show. And then there was Daniel Logan, who was fairly popular. And I even met, well, of course, Uri Geller was a friend. He lived in Manhattan here, and I would often visit with him. And Matthew Manning, who still is over in the UK. He's a healer. I've tried to get him on the program, but the times just don't coincide. And he claims that he gets his messages from from spirits, and I guess there are all kinds of ways of being perceptive. Would not our guest agree on that? I mean, that everybody seems to have a unique talent.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, are either of our guests, do you get messages from spirit?
Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. I get messages from spirit. I read photos. I do what is known as psychometry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And I get a lot of information that way.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of information that way. I also do pendulum, and I'm just now learning tarot. I don't have a huge handle on it yet, and the operative word being yet. I will get the hang of it eventually, but I'm not there yet. I just sort of kind of came into it knowing things. And it screwed up my life in a pretty big way when I was young. But now I think I've kind of got a little bit of a handle on it. Not all the way, but I'm getting there.
Well, we did when I was running, I had one of the first metaphysical schools, centers in the country, dating back to the mid-1960s, the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences. And we had lectures almost every week, and workshops, and we were very, very active in the occult in the 1960s in New York, which was there were a lot of different groups that were I guess just forming at the time. A couple of them may still be in existence. Most of them have since passed into time and space. But I found that I did a little bit of psychometry myself, where I could touch. You could give me an object like a key or a coin, mm-hmm. or something that you had in your possession for a while, and I can't say that I couldn't. I wasn't like some of these the psychics that came and did work for us, and that they could sit there and talk to somebody for 15 or 20 minutes. Mine was blah 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 blah, and that's it. Mm-hmm. But it was like one or two things that were important, and I guess I just wasn't the type of person who wanted to sit there and chat with somebody I didn't know that much. I mean, here's your information, and never charged for it. Although I did go on a psychic cruise once, and I did crystal ball readings until I got seasick.
I've heard of your school. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I have always wanted to go to a school like that. I've never been able to, but I've always wanted to. You know what? That's on my bucket list.
Well, there for a while now, there were centers that popped up all over the country, and there's still quite a few of them, I guess, in existence. They've kind of turned into chameleons and disguised themselves like new learning or alternative thoughts. They don't dare, I think, use the word psychic or occult in the title of their center. They try to give it a more, what would be the word, Tim, holistic feel.
Yeah, that would be good. At one time, they would say New Age, but even that anymore, that's almost become antiquated.
Well, we even had Herman Slater's Warlock Shop. Now, yeah, for a few years here in the late 60s and early 70s, Wicca and various other forms of witchcraft and wizardry were fairly big in Manhattan. And Herman was a openly declared gay witch. And he had a shop where you could go in and buy oils and altar products and a great collection of robes, I must say. And it was kind of strange because, you know, you went into the shop and it smelled of incense and, you know, the chimes and the whole bit. And I kind of like missed that type of feeling to an occult shop. You know, I don't think in Manhattan we have anything like that anymore that I'm aware of. But he had his office in the back behind a sliding panel. So, I mean, I guess unless he wanted to have you come into his inner sanctum, you would never even know he was around. And I guess they had their own rituals and things that they did, you know, on the different Sabbaths and so forth. And a lot of people said, "Oh, they're Satanists." Well, they weren't Satanists at all. They might have been a little bit into Aleister Crowley or something, but he's gotten the reputation of being a Satanist, which isn't really true either. But I don't know. Do you either one of you feel are there negative beings out there? I mean, that are trying to lead people astray. You get that from the Christian fundamentalist flock that this is all demonic.
There's a lot of demonic, I guess, spirits out there, negative. Isn't that funny when you start talking about them, how it interferes? But one of the things that people are not aware of is if you have a higher vibration, then they're less likely to interface with you or even have any effect over you. And so that has a lot to do with it. I haven't encountered a lot of negative beings, let's say, in my lifetime and then through my experiences. And one reason is because I consider myself protected and I'm doing, you know, work for the angels and by the angels, but it doesn't mean that they're not available. If I wanted to delve down that street and go into somewhere where I know they are, like the question you asked Melissa, normally I already know before I go in somewhere what I'm going to get into, and then it gives me the chance to avoid it.
Well, do you think that you can get spirits to do your bidding?
Yes, there are false prophets and false spirits that may get with someone and try to influence them and try to trick them into believing that they're a positive influence. But I always say the proof's in the pudding. If you've been doing it a long time, you know what to look for and what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what is the source of the negativity?
I don't look at negative entities or negative spirits is bad. That's one thing. It's just the polarity, and that helps you understand and not get caught up on what's good, what's bad, and what to do and what not to do. To me, it's just a opposite energy or opposite polarity, neither good or bad. It's just our interpretation that we make it bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have any of the have spirits come to you and masqueraded as something that they were not, or pretend to be someone, and they're not really that individual, like in the case of a spirit?
In the early time, it used to. I mean, I've been doing this 40 plus years, but let's say in the first 15 to 20 years that they would, but I always had a way of using a filter or knowing whether they're positive or if they're low vibration. And so I have encountered them, and even possessions through other people. I've witnessed that, and I did paranormal work, even ran a paranormal group for over 35 years. So I'm aware of what's out there, but it's not my forte. I don't mess with them, and I don't try to make them mad. I observe them and learn from them.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Melissa?
Me, gosh, I have experienced negative things. Like I said earlier, that property and home that we just fled from. Mainly, though, the majority of the bad stuff is people. A lot of it is people, humans. You know, very, very bad energies can attach themselves to humans. Yes, it's true. And I've seen others that have had it happen. And, you know, I try to avoid it as much as I can, but I've seen it a time or two.
No, I was just wondering, Tim, you and I talk about UFOs and space aliens or ultra-terrestrials. Do either of our guests have space contacts?
I would say yes.
Yes.
And who do they say that they are? What is the story behind that? Monte, you want to go tell us?
Yes, there again, I take a totally different view and try not to segment or identify necessarily what planets they're from or who your guides are. To me, that's just a distraction. I look at what they produce or what they provide, what information, and I don't know about the bad guys, the grays and the reptilians, even though I'm aware of what people refer to them as. But in my experiences, most of the people that I have come in contact with, let's say etherically or telepathically, are here to help.
And where do these entities purport to be from?
I have never asked them.
Do they materialize?
No, I haven't had them materialize. Telepathically, I have communicated with them, and they have asked me not to try to identify certain things about them or make themselves materialize because they purport that it would change your spiritual path. It would influence you, just like winning the lottery would change a person, sometimes in a negative way. And they have told me not to ask that they materialize or do anything to prove themselves for the very reason that it could mess you up. It could change the course karmically of your life and your contract. And so I don't choose to communicate with them. If I get a communication from them, I'm well aware of, it's them talking to me, and they have never steered me wrong on anything they've ever told me.
Are any of these spirits, so-called spirits, time travelers?
Yes. I look at it, again, that there is no time and there is no space, that we're interdimensional. And even one of the questions I think that Tim had on the sidebar on your webpage is talking about is, heaven really real or right next to us? And we are multidimensional beings. We have probable selves, probably in other dimensions, working simultaneous as we work now. And the future, the past, and the present are all the same. That's kind of my take on it. But I don't subscribe to a lot of the beliefs about UFOs, the negative stuff specifically.
And Melissa, how about you?
I've only seen crafts. I saw one December. In fact, my cousin who lives with us pointed this out to me. We were going down the road through Taos, New Mexico, coming into town. He said, "Hey, check that craft out up there, by the mountains." I looked, and there was no wings on this thing. It was like the shape of a cigar, if you will. It was very, very long, but I couldn't tell just how big it was because it was so high up. And there were no wings or nothing. I thought it was an airplane, but I looked again, and I realized it wasn't an airplane. I'm going, okay, this is interesting. It's during midday, or later in the day or something. It's like mid to late December, and I'm seeing this thing. I'm going, what the heck is that? And I've seen other such crafts, and we used to see things all the time at our old property, stuff chasing each other.
Was this in Oregon?
No, this was in New Mexico.
Oh, New Mexico, yeah. Yeah, you're just saying Tahoe. Well, did you ever hear the mysterious hum, the sound?
I've heard the hum. Oh, yeah, I've heard it. It's annoying as all heck. It is annoying. Oh, believe me, it can give you a massive headache, and it used to drive me nuts. I mean, it was pretty bad a couple times, but then I learned how to block it out. There is a way to block it out and ignore it.
You know what I do? I live right here in the middle of Manhattan, and I've noticed when the cloud layer is down, like in semi-foggy conditions, that it keeps, it just saturates the whole area with all kinds of sound. I mean, you can hear a hammer being used 2 blocks away here, 2 city blocks away, is to turn the fan or the air conditioner on, and that covers up the noise. Of course, you can't do it I could do it here in the middle of the winter because sometimes it's like 95 degrees in here. but you have to learn how to live with that, because I know some people are more sensitive than others to outside interference and noise and stuff like that. And of course, now being down at the Tahoe Hum and all, there are other places, of course, where this kind of hum or sound is also heard, but also too, they've got sonic booms that people have actually recorded, and that's been going on for, Tim, how many years have we heard about these sonic booms, and nobody's ever able to explain what causes them?
Oh, well, I mean, there were the, like the booms, especially on the East Coast, that were heard, back as far as, colonial times and even before. I mean, the Native Americans, had specific names for them. So, yeah, I mean, this is not a new phenomena. And,
I guess, people end up calling the Air Force or the police. And of course, they always say that, they're not responsible for these sonic booms, but some of them have been so strong that I think they've even been picked up on seismographs, and yet there's no explanations, for them. But do you think, Monte, that most people have a built-in intuitive sense, or are some people more advanced than others, and it just comes naturally?
I probably would believe that everybody has the ability, but just like running, some people can run faster because they exercise those muscles, and those that have lived in an intuitive world are highly sensitive, specifically right brain dominant, then that opens that up for them a lot better.
And what would you say that you could do to if you're looking to advance yourself psychically? What would you recommend that people do?
The number one thing is be aware of everything. Pay attention to everything around you, and also if you're right-handed, switch to your left hand. Try to be more ambidextrous, and just basically pay attention to your surroundings, what you think and what you hear, and honor that.
Are there certain times of the day or certain times of the month? I've heard 3 a.m. is supposed to be, instead of midnight, really the witching hour, that 3 a.m. is the closest when the physical and the spirit world are likely to merge or be more open to each other.
Mine's usually around 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning is when it's more active.
Likewise for me.
All right. Well, Tim, I'm going to have to interrupt you all here because our witching hour is fast approaching for our bottom of the hour break. So we'll continue this conversation with our guest on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned for more.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
All right, welcome back to the last segment of Exploring the Bizarre. And Tim, it just always seems like we just get to this point and we have so many questions. And our guests tonight, we're talking with Monte Hamilton and Melissa Bryan. And Monte, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that you are very well known for is your predictions. And I know that you've made a lot of really astonishing, accurate predictions over the years. And it seems to me that that would be something that would just be really difficult to do. I mean, at least considering the possible nature of time itself and how the future may be laid out or not laid out, I suppose, because I just always imagine that the future is really nothing more than shadows of things that could be, and it just all can happen. It can just all change in an instant just because of the things that we do right now.
That's correct. There's a lot of interference, as I call it, or karma or other things that could come into play. If you make a prediction, sometimes a lot of the people that make predictions today are making forecasts. They're not making predictions. And just like we were talking about studio quality audio and things like that, I'm a big stickler for people that come out and say there's going to be an earthquake in California. They don't say when, don't say where, they don't say what magnitude. And so I have prided myself and spent thousands and thousands of hours formulating predictions, and a majority of them have a specific time, date, or window. Sometimes I can predict even on a specific day, but normally within a week or two, some things are a month or two. It just slides depending on what happens between now and then, because a lot of times I make predictions 20 years ahead, but most of them are within a 2-year window.
And what is your inspiration for these predictions? And do you have favorite kinds of? I mean, we know people in the old days who used to predict the outcome of sporting events and things along that line. I mean, do you have a favorite? I don't know if that's the proper word, but a favorite type of prediction?
Yes, I would say anything with earth changes, anything political. I don't try to do any celebrity work, or I don't gamble, so I don't do sports predictions normally because other people will be betting on my predictions and I'm not supposed to do that. So I would say anything to do with politics, anything to do with earth changes are my favorites, and they're usually the most accurate.
So make a couple of predictions for us.
You named the topic.
Well, earth changes.
I sense that a lot of things are going to happen this year, specifically, more than likely, major earthquakes hitting Mexico, hitting more than likely even the West Coast. The Philippines has I've seen a window where a lot of earth slides, not earth slides, but slides, because of torrential rains. There's probably going to be some in China as well. So this year, we're going to see a combination of tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanoes, because this is going to be a very volatile year. And prior to coming on the show, it kind of hit me that sometimes these things are organic in that sense, that they're just spontaneous, that I think the biggest test for President Trump is going to be something related to an earthquake or a natural disaster, just like George Bush had his with 9/11 and President Obama had the Gulf.
You don't think it'll have anything to do with a porno star?
No, I think she'll fizzle out.
I don't know. Every day he makes a move, it seems it gets in deeper and deeper. I don't know.
And that's true. But I was one of the rare people that predicted that he would become president. So there's a lot of things that are going to happen under his administration.
I bet there is. Yeah. Any forecast as far as combat goes? I mean, it seems like the Russians are getting a little frisky.
No, I'm a big proponent of the Russians, and all this is a smokescreen. I've been telling people for 20 years the Russians are our biggest allies and our strongest allies, but we have to have a boogeyman, or we couldn't keep up the industrial complex, military complex. And so we're making them out to be a boogeyman, but they are nothing like what they're being portrayed, and they're not doing, just like the sarin gas that you just heard, that's a lie. They never did that. They didn't do it in Syria either.
And Melissa, do you have any predictions for us?
I don't do predictions. I stay away from it. As a rule, I stay away from that stuff because 9 times out of 10, I'm dead wrong. Okay, I don't do predictions. I try not to. You know, I've had a couple kids born that I was right about. You know, them coming on time and all that. But you know how kids are; they come when they come. And every kid comes on their own right time. That's how it is.
Well, when
I don't do predictions.
When you talk with a client, then what is it that a client comes to you looking for, and then how do you deal with that?
Well, most often I tell them exactly what it is I do before they get into a reading with me. That way they know what to expect. You know, because I never like to leave my client feeling like, well, I'm not going to get what I came for, you know? And when I give a reading, any bit of information I get, it comes like a tidal wave. And I mean, I get everything. Because what happens is my guide will come to me and they'll sit before me the chart, the Akashic chart from other side. Because I've been known to go to Hall of Records so often, I've practically got a golden key there. They'll come to me with the chart of this individual and say, okay, here's what you need to know. And I have to give all of the information I'm getting pertaining to the reading, or I lose everything, literally. I mean, I lose all the information. It just goes away. Poof, you know? And I'm sitting here reading from their chart in the whole thing of what they're asking me to read for. I'm reading from their exact chart that's in front of me. And if I say, okay, I'm looking away from you, but it's not because I'm ignoring you, I'm reading your information because this is what my guide is presenting me with. Here's what you want to know or what you need to know. And here's who all else is coming through, because my guide is bringing their whoever's coming in, you know, and or this individual from spirit has followed them to the reading and says, hey, I'm here. And I will see them like a 3-dimensional person. And I will give the information that this other individual is giving me. And I have to give everything or I lose the whole thing.
Now, are there certain people that you can just not read for?
Yes, I do not read skeptics. I make a rule of it because they're just simply not open at this point unless they have an experience that changes their own mind. They're not open to what we do. So I just make a rule not to read for them.
Now, where do you get most of the people that you read from? I mean, they hear about you from word of mouth or recommendations from other people that have gone for readings before you?
Mainly word of mouth, yeah. I've gotten a lot of, you know, real bad stuff in the past, but, you know, I'm as accurate as what I can be, and I come in with at least a 90% accuracy rate. I leave 10% margin of error because, you know, that accounts for humanity and, you know, anything I might say misinterpret or, you know, get a piece of information wrong, you know, I have to account for that. So I leave it at 90% with the other 10% wide open.
Now,
because no psychic is ever going to.
And any place that you would like to take that you haven't delved into, or you haven't you feel that you could develop further in some area? I mean, is there a further step in your psychic development?
Yeah, I've wanted to develop into tarot. I've wanted to develop into other areas of, other sight and all that, I wanted to particularly go to such places as Sedona, Arizona. I don't know. I just feel drawn to there right now. I would like to eventually visit there and find out what
there.
that
I know I've had some pretty amazing synchronicities.
What is it?
That have taken place there, and in Sedona, it's a higher. Not only is it a beautiful, part of the country, but the Red Rocks and all of that, but just so much paranormal activity that's taken place there. Everybody's got to go there at least once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just feel like there's something there I haven't seen yet or haven't heard, or, the operative word being yet, like it's coming, but it's not there at this time. You see what I'm saying?
Now, Monte, would you say that there are certain, have you done a lot of traveling?
Yes, I've traveled extensively up until the 80s and 90s. Pretty much all the way across the country, and been out of the country a little bit.
And would you say that there are certain areas that the vibes are better?
Oh, absolutely. You talk about Sedona. My first time there, I was told before I left that I would levitate, and energetically I did. It threw me a loop because of the vortexes there, and that was back in the late 80s before a lot of people moved there.
Uh-huh. Now, you levitated, you say?
Energetically. I could feel that when I was looking down with the people that were talking to me, I felt like I was on a stepladder and couldn't drive. I had to have somebody drive me home. It was like being on a high or being drunk, but it was just an energy high from being there the first time.
Uh-huh. Well, we've heard all. We have a fellow there, Tim, who's been on the show several times, Tom, right? And he has
Dongo.
all these massive volumes of photographs of all kinds of weird things and orbs and blue men and streaks in the sky and things that just shouldn't be there. In fact, there's a ranch there, the Bradshaw Ranch, which for a while was kind of like their version of the Skinwalker Ranch, in Utah, where people were seeing these orbs and glowing balls of light and so forth. And we've even heard about creatures of cryptoids of one type or another actually crossing the main highway there. So I would tell about my synchronicities, but that would take half a show in itself, Tim, I think, wouldn't it?
Go ahead, Monty.
Strangely enough, I went out to meet a UFO group. It's not something I've spent a lot of time researching, but it was the IQ4 group. It was in Tempe, Arizona, and they took me to see Chief White Bear, who was a chief of the Hopi Indians, and his story was that he could go out in the desert and call the UFOs to him. And so I went out there to meet with this group, and then they took me out to meet Chief White Bear. So that was long before I really understood a lot that was going on in the UFO field. And again, I'm not a study student or anything of UFOs. I'm well aware of them, but to me, it's something I accept.
Monty, I have a question here that a friend of mine who's listening to the program just texted me, and she wants to know, you were referring earlier about earth changes, and she was just curious whether or not these earth changes are the result of natural forces, man-made causes, or maybe a little from column A, a little from column B.
It's both of them, because we have a lot of, let's say, special equipment the military uses. That, if we want to say the HARP system and the woodpecker system, there's so much going on energetically. We've got CERN, where they're trying to access some of the the information for black holes and time continuum studies that it's disrupting Mother Earth, and it's going to cause some problems.
Well, and what is there anything that us as individuals can do to help the matter?
Hang on tight. Because there's not a whole lot we can do. This is a lesson, most people that I'm sure you already know, and you've got a background in Atlantis. That's what happened to them. Is they got too advanced and they destroyed themselves, and we're almost on that that point now.
Do you think we could destroy ourselves?
Oh, absolutely. That's the main reason why the Space Brotherhood is here, is to stop that. That's why a lot of the spacecraft, Elon Musk and some of the others, are not successful. And I've predicted that in my blogs. They won't be successful because they're not going to let them go up in space. There's too much up there that can be revealed. And there are forces at work to stop them.
That was something that I was told through several contacts as far back as the mid-1960s. That the space people, good, bad, or indifferent, depending on how many groups there might be, were not going to allow us to set up a shop on the moon or on any of these other planets. And isn't it amazing? Here we landed on the moon back really before the age of computerization and all the things that we have now, but we can't seem to get back there. It's not that far. It's not that far away. I don't know.
Yeah, the Russians got there before we did. They got there in the mid-'60s. That was just a political ploy in '69, July 19th. '69. The Russians had already beat us there, and the whole space program itself is a PR stunt.
Well, maybe the Germans even beat the Russians there.
That could be true as well.
Yeah.
So now why haven't the Russians been crowing about this achievement then?
Well, politically, it wouldn't serve them. That's why I say that we've been allies with them back to the '60s, and it was only for political expedience that we had to have a boogeyman and to steer our country in one direction or the other, trying to get us out of the doldrums that we're in. That's the main reason I say the Russians are our closest enemies, closest allies, because we've been working with them in the space program all the way back to the '50s, and specifically the mid-'60s. They're spacecraft that are up there now that were launched back in the mid-'60s, long before we ever got our space station. They already had one.
Mm.
We had our boogeyman, and now we have our rocket man.
That's it.
What about rogue nations, say like North Korea?
I've been predicting for several years that North Korea will join forces with South Korea and be a major economic country to deal with, and we're seeing some of that happen now behind the scenes. But the days are numbered. I'm telling you, I've been preaching this for the last 2 years specifically, and saying that the powers that be, when I'm talking about the powers upstairs, do not like this issue between North and South Korea, and they will join forces. It's probably going to be in the next 18 months. They'll join forces, and they'll put down their arms and remove the DMZ.
Huh. Well, that would be, I don't know, that seems a little far-fetched at the moment. But Tim, I see we're closing in on the midnight hour. And I think we should invite our guests to tell us how our listeners can get in touch with them and the projects that they're working on, and any forthcoming lectures or conferences, books, and so forth. So, Melissa, why don't we start with you? How do our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to my website, www.psychicmom20172017.wixsite.com/UVPM, and they can call me, and I have all the links to everything I'm doing right there. And currently I'm in the process of working on renaming and rewriting, expanding my first book, which basically takes you through my life story, my walk with spirit, and everything that I've experienced in my life, which continues now, of course, obviously. Like last night, we had something happen where it sounded like someone was trying to get into our motel room with a key card, and our door was locked shut. And when we went to look outside in the hallway, there was nobody there. Yeah. You tell me and we'll both know.
And what was the original title of your book, Melissa?
The original title was, oh God, I'm trying to remember now. Let me see. Hang on. I've got a thing of it here. My Life as a Medium, A Journey Through the Paranormal. It will now be called Born into Shamanism.
All right. Fantastic. And Monte, how about you?
I can be reached through my website. It's pretty easy. It's just worldpsychic.org. And I have a schedule page where I'll be traveling and some of the projects that I'm working on. And anyone's invited to contact me if you have any questions.
And I should point out that both of our guest links to their web pages are on our web page at KCORradio. And so you'll be able to click on those and get easy access to these locations. And Melissa, I'm sorry, Tim, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and Tim, I know you have a busy schedule. What are you working on currently?
Well, I am working on trying to get some chapters out for one of your new projects that you're working on. I don't know if you want us to talk about the subject right now.
Well, why not? It's a hostile UFOs, because all the space
right.
are not necessarily sweetness and light. Of course, we don't know if these are really Space Brothers or what are causing some of these strange aerial incidents where people are being burned by close approaches of UFOs, radiation, and so forth. You've got a couple of, I guess, over the years, incidents where our planes have disappeared, and of course, people are disappearing in national parks and around the country, and there doesn't seem to be an explanation whether we can blame these on people from elsewhere, or whether people are slipping into some sort of interdimensional vortex. It's really hard to say, but we've got a lot of good contributors to the book, and of course, we have a couple of new titles that have just come out. The Weird Winged Wonders. We've got one on Project Magnet about Wilbur Smith.
All right, Tim, the music's playing. We're going to have to say goodnight.
Oh, no. Remember our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and thanks to our guests.
Yeah, thank you.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.